Before we get started, just to remind everybody, I don't know if anyone's been following the social media or anything, but just tapping into the roster a little bit on this 2009 team, 5 seniors, 5 juniors, 8 sophomores, 9 freshmen. So similar to the 2016 team, actually, kind of overloaded a little bit with underclassmen, which I always find interesting, since a lot of times we talk about how championship teams are sort of made with seniors or with the upperclassmen. Not that this wasn't, no offense, Jeff and Kyle and whatnot, but it is obviously a pretty good balance of guys up and down the roster. All right, but I will ask Kyle and Jeff Dennis to chime in right away here. From what you remember, obviously a couple teams before you and the seniors that finished up in 2008 and 07 before that won regular season titles, came up a little short in the tournament. What do you guys recall heading into the 09 season, your final season, in terms of kind of the expectation and the desire to kind of go out on tops, particularly seeing that the other first 2 teams before you didn't get it done completely? What do you guys recall? Anything?
Well, first, I'll talk about the pitching staff. So, I think Greg will probably agree. We're pretty lucky to come when we did. The seniors, when I was a freshman, were maybe not as refined as the junior class and the sophomore class that year. And I got to, kind of sit behind guys like Zach Groh, Scott Diamond, Mike Van Gorder, all who had a lot of success with the program. So they kind of really set the tone, and it's easy to follow guys that are good people on the field and good people off the field. And as far as the pitching staff goes, it was fun. It was easy. We worked hard. And, after the 2008 season, we didn't have Scott Diamond anymore. We lost Zach Groh. So we had, obvious holes. We knew Murph was going to step up, but there's still two spots for conference starters. And, I think we all had a little idea of who it was going to be, but until those guys finish summer ball, get back for the fall and see how much stronger they got and how much work they put in, we didn't really know. So there was question marks. And obviously, James and Mike stepped up, and the rest is history.
Kyle, what do you recall?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was the experience. Like us as seniors now had made it there to where we should have won it a couple years in a row, and we just couldn't quite get over that. What was it? That second game of the tournament. We learned how important winning that second game was after the opening game. But we knew we had a strong group of underclassmen, and they really came out big for us. But huge. I mean, a few of you guys, Aguilera, Choki, and then everyone else just got better from the years before. And that's really what I remember the most. It's just we had some great experience those 2 years prior that really taught us how to. Sorry. Really taught us, how to get to that next level.
I promise I won't go through the game-by-game blow in the season, but you guys started out and got 1 win at the Dallas Baptist, down at Dallas Baptist. The middle game you won. Then went to New Mexico and got thumped a little bit there. And I know Tim's used to me sending him notes or talking to him in a little panic with some of these lopsided early season losses that tend to kind of stick out, at least for SID people, but probably nobody else. Tim, my favorite question to you, any worry after some of those games at New Mexico, or was it truly just a matter of taking your lumps early from a very good team?
Well, what I remember most about the New Mexico series was sitting in the dugout with Hutch. And at some point we were losing 27 to whatever. And I think it was the 8th inning. And a kid came up to bat with 2 guys on base. And I turned to Hutch and I said, Jesus, please don't make it 30. And I never got that word out of my mouth. And the kid hit absolute missile out of the ballpark to make it 30. So, so much for what I was hoping for at that point. But honestly, John, like in other years, those games are what they are in terms of us preparing for the rest of the season. We knew we had a talented group of just not the returning guys, but the incoming guys. And so we really thought it was just a matter of time before we put it together, and eventually it's exactly what we did.
Anybody else remember anything about either of those 2 road trips, just in terms, not necessarily the score or anything, but just the morale and just the team kind of coming together early?
Well, I mean, I could say I remember being the guy having to start after that game. So I kind of, was like trying to give myself a little pep talk. I remember in like the bathroom, like, all right, let's, try to make the next one a little bit better than what just happened, So
As a freshman, I didn't think it could get any worse. So it was all uphill from there.
Yeah, just a reminder on the scores because I'm a glutton for this kind of cruelty. 15-3, 30-2, 8-1, and 13-3 for those 4 scores in New Mexico. But again, some great scheduling. You followed that up with a pair against Maryland Eastern Shore. So that's definitely a recipe for turning things around, getting Eastern Shore on the schedule. I want to talk a little bit about. I know Tim, you and I have talked a little bit about this too, but this was the year. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but the more lively baseball, and so all the offensive numbers were up, and our offensive numbers were up substantially from the year before. The ERA climbed as well. Those couple years before they kind of corrected it with the bats. What I guess any of the pitchers on the call initially, what do you recall it truly being a really difficult time to keep the damn ball in the ballpark? And did you guys, hitters and pitchers, understand that a lot of this was because of the ball itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just highlighted the New Mexico series, which was very early in the year. So I think we knew right away there was definitely a difference to be had. I mean, they were a good team, but certainly 30 runs in a baseball game is just out of this world.
You guys ever have any discussion, the hitters versus the pitchers in practice or anything, just about, kind of how life was more difficult for the pitchers, but therefore, the offense needed to kind of do its part to keep up and get runs on the board? Was that sort of a little banter going on at all within the team?
Yeah, why couldn't this offense score 32?
Fair question.
I don't want to hear anything about the pitchers' lives being more difficult, ever.
Yeah, go ahead and keep doing your pull runs and then complain later. What do you have, 7 of them, Augie, and you were out of gas?
Not gonna touch on that.
I didn't think there was anything wrong with the balls. I thought I was just having a bad year.
Yeah, I agree. I wish I knew about that excuse. I would have relied on that heavily.
Well, the numbers definitely jumped. I mean, I think you guys hit 320 as a team. You hit 50 home runs that season after hitting 38 the year before, and hitting 280 as a team. I mean, that's a pretty sizable jump, particularly in the average. But and then the team ERA jumped a half a run. Of course, some of that may be attributed to Zach Groh leaving. But there were just a ton of games. I think it was like either 23 or 24 where one of the teams scored in double figures in the game. So, but I guess nobody was hung up on that idea that it had suddenly become a real offensive game. Ryan, what's your take on that, Hurba, Coach Hurba?
I don't know, John. I think when you're living it, you don't really know. I don't think we got a great appreciation until like some of these guys started swinging the new bats under the new standards in 2011. I remember when that new shipment came, we went out to the field and I think I threw BP for about 2 hours to a bunch of veterans. And I saw some guys who could really leave the yard in batting practice from pole to pole, come up a little short. And the looks were really nervous. Like there were some guys that were like, whoa, I feel like I got a frying pan in my hand. You know what I mean? So I don't think it was until you swung those bats that maybe you appreciated how live the other bats were. But John, I think the other thing that made it a little bit tougher on pitchers and defenses is we play exponentially more games on turf now than we did back in 2009. So if you just go through the box scores and you look at our postseason, how many errors were made, a lot of that's the result of a ground ball that's now caught. Across the board in college baseball, fielding percentages have gone up probably 20 points in the last 10 years. And that's because, as recent as a couple of years ago, going through it, I think in 2017, I think we played all but 6 games on turf or something crazy. So that's played just as much of a factor, I think, back then as well. You know, you could play the game on the ground or in the air, and you had a chance to have pretty good success if you just found some barrel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Coach Hurba, I do want to know, you know, you mentioned you were throwing a bunch of BP. I mean, we could go back to 08 when you decided to plunk me in the back of the head, you know, at the conference tournament. Maybe everybody was concerned about your BP as opposed to trying to hit it out of the yard. I don't know. That might be a problem.
Yeah, that could be it too.
Might have been the problem.
That could have been. That particular day, not that my BP is great on any day, but that particular day, I might have been frazzled that we were standing on a field where the grass was 12 inches high and snakes were like swimming around my ankles bales on that auxiliary field down in Farmingdale. Some ancillary issues that day too, so.
All right, we'll give you a pass then.
I don't think I ever want to hear the word Farmingdale again. Just bad vibe. All right. So, yeah, we'll move along the schedule. You took 2 from Hartford to start conference play, then took 3 or 4 against Albany, and then 3 or 4 at home against Stony Brook, which, you know, certainly probably at the time seemed important. And obviously, you know, by the end of the season, it was important. Those were all one-run games. And even the one that you lost at the end. But 2 walk-offs. Anybody have any firm recollection of the Stony Brook series? It's 11 years ago, I know. Opening game trailed 7-3 in the 9th inning before rallying. Abrams won it with a walk-off hit to the wall.
What?
Second game of the doubleheader, down 3-1 in the 8th. Ended up winning it on a Taylor walk-off RBI single. Calderon won the 3rd game with a walk-off 2-run single. So 3 walk-offs against Stony Brook. Anybody remember at the time, obviously they had won the 08 title. Did anybody have any good friends on Stony Brook or any personal connections to that team in particular?
Well, growing up on Long Island, I played a bunch of those guys, like a bunch of them, even like in my league. So knowing those guys, seeing them year after year, always kind of like, was like, all right, but I beat them in high school. I want to beat them now. And even from the beginning, I remember going out to see Binghamton play Stony Brook. And I forget which year it was, but somebody on Binghamton slid hard in second, and the Stony Brook team didn't like that too much. And basically like a whole brawl ensued. And from right then there, I was sold on the rivalry.
It has been a great one for sure.
Sounds like a Sinicki slide to me.
Sinicki, yeah. Tim or Ryan, do you remember that moment?
I don't, but it could have been a Sinicki slide, and then Dan Gorder got pissed, and Ace and Gary went at the. I think that's probably pretty accurate.
John, this is Jim Norris. Can I break in for just a second?
Yeah, please, Jim.
Yeah, I noticed you're going down through the schedule of games, and just want to remind everybody that the season did start with a team orientation session. And, you know, I thought I might give you a few highlights from that, but I see Mike Aguilera is still awake. So I don't want to jeopardize that and put him to sleep on this call. But believe it or not, I've got to get going because my wife has just finished cooking here, and I've got to go outside and turn our sprinklers off before I enjoy this meal that she's whipped up. But I do just want to say what a great bunch you guys were. I really enjoyed watching you play back then. I was super proud of you. A tremendous program, and it's nice to see you guys. You know, even if it's through Zoom here or whatever. Dave, I think you and your wife just had a baby not too long ago?
Did, 2.5 weeks.
Okay, great. Congratulations. Tell your wife I was asking for. It was nice to see Murphy and Mike at Nice Egg Stadium, too, when you guys went through there. But good to see all of you. And apologize, I got to break out. But if I stay on this thing, our smoke detector will be going off and I'll be disrupting the call. So take care, fellas, and good luck in everything you're doing. And I got a lot of great memories from when you played here. So thanks for inviting me, John.
Yep, thanks, Jim.
Very soothing voice.
Coach Norris, boy, he's a treasure. He's awesome. All right, so worked your way through conference play, took 2 from UMBC, split 4 at Maine, then headed into the final weekend hosting Vermont. And I believe you just needed 1 win to clinch there, which we got in that first game. And then no one seemed to care that they grabbed the last 3 in that series after we had already clinched. So my question was going to be for Coach Norris as well, but now definitely for Tim and Ryan. What do you, at that time, what do you recall about the scenario? Obviously, the conference mandate was you needed a field with lights to host. That's why we couldn't have done it in previous years. What do you recall about the timing of the conversations about whether we could use UE or any other field in the area? When did that all start happening?
Well, during the spring, I know Ryan and I actually talked about UE. Started talking about other places in the area. We actually got in a car and drove up to Elmira and looked at the old minor league stadium up there, Dunn Field. And we got out of the car, walked on the field. It took us about 10 seconds to realize that thing wasn't appropriate and championship ready. So I remember scheduling a practice down at UE, and we went through a workout. We watched how the ball, reacted, if the fences were going to be too short, if the field played well. And I think at the end of the night, we determined that at that point, we really didn't care how short the fences were or if the ball had true bounces or not. We wanted to give this group an opportunity to play at home and host the tournament. And I think that basically kind of sealed the deal. And our administrators supported it, and UE cooperated. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because winning a championship and celebrating at home, I think is the best way to have it happen.
And what do you recall about? Let's see, Tom and Corey and Greg. You guys perhaps you probably played on that field at some point, right, or no?
Yeah, I remember finding out we were playing at UE, and it was kind of like, at first, you were kind of excited that, okay, we get to play in our hometown, we get to play in front of our fans. It's something we've always been wanting to do. And then being like, for me, going to Binghamton High School, and then being like, okay, we're going to go play for a college championship now, a conference championship. And I got to do it on the field of a high school that literally, they were our rival in high school, but they beat us every big game. They beat us in high school. And I remember my junior year beating us in Legion Ball to go to districts. And it's just like, I can't get away from these guys. But I do remember driving in, we first pulled up to the field and actually seeing a pretty decent sized crowd there. And it was weird just because the way they had their field set up with the parking lot up high, looking down over the field and kind of fans up there and down the lines. It never looked like that in high school. So immediately when you walked up, just to be able to play in Binghamton, not have to travel, not have to let someone, not have to go to Farmingdale again. And, it instantly became worth it. But I do remember being like, man, I can't get away from UE and Coach Foles.
What are some of the other guys seeing that field for the first time when you had to practice there? What were some of your initial thoughts and concerns about how it was going to go down? Anything particular relative to the field?
I'm going to chime right back in on that, just from years of high school there. I was terrified of left field. That was a shorter. I watched in high school, and then just balls fly out of that left field line. So then with, college caliber players and this and that, especially in a conference tournament atmosphere like that, I remember being a little bit worried about, not wanting to make sure that making sure no one was able to get their hands through and pull the ball down the line, because I've seen balls sail into those trees in left field for years.
Anybody else?
I'd be curious what Kyle Klee thought, because he didn't have to play the ramp on our actual home field, and whether or not he liked the UE better.
Yeah, I was very excited about that, not having to play there. I was a little bit worried about the lights, though, how they were going to be at night. But I don't remember much from then, but I don't remember that being an issue at all. And it was fun being able to just stay there in Binghamton and play.
And then you guys had the matchup with Vermont, and again, any concern, less than a week after they had probably been feeling pretty good about themselves, taking 3 of 4. They got the player of the year and the Duffy kid. They got a couple real good pitchers. In particular, Tim and Ryan, any initial concerns about that matchup right out of the gate?
I think my biggest concern, John, was they were dropping the program. And, I know for a fact they had the head coach from the University of Tennessee was up for our tournament watching Duffy play. And so for me, it was less about, maybe who they were as a team, but more so, what they wanted to do as a program and maybe try to, knock off us as a top seed and get to the NCAA tournament on their last season. So I do remember that being a bit of a just a concern on my part, like what are we going to see here? They're going to be like caged animals. But, in typical fashion of this group, we took care of business when we needed to.
So we get into that first game. It was a pretty crazy game. You guys, I imagine, remember 22 hits, 20 of them singles. 2 big lead changes. You guys jumped up early. You're up 4-0. Vermont rally. Yeah, 4-0 in the 7th. You were up. Vermont scored 7. So lead 7-4 going into the 8th. So 1 out in the 8th. You guys were 5 outs away from dropping that opener. CJ started out with single, Calderon single, Dunn single, then pitching change. Clee 2-run single, made it 7-6. Wild pitch, intentional walk to Taylor, loads the bases. Sharon ties it with a sac fly. Chokey, intentional walk, pitching change. Skelly reaches on an error from the pitcher, brings in a go-ahead run. Another run scores on a wild pitch. So that set off a 6-run 8th inning. Anybody have any particular memories of that comeback or anything about that first game win over Vermont?
I don't remember much about it, but I remember we did that so many times that year that we didn't even it wasn't even like a thought, like we weren't even worried, still an inning or 2 left. Like we were expected it to happen almost every time anyways.
Yeah, you had made a bunch of rallies during the year. And again, just you guys averaged 7 runs a game during the year and double-digit runs in the postseason. So certainly, getting to 7 or 8 runs probably wasn't a real worry. All right, so that brings you into the winner's bracket game against Albany the next day. And they jump ahead 7-1, so you're down pretty big early in that one. And then you guys score the final 10 runs of the game to win at 11-7. Albany committed 6 errors. I'm glad, Ryan, that you talked about the errors because that was going to be one of my questions. I kind of forgot about how turf makes it so easy these days. There were a slew of errors in this tournament, and I didn't know whether a lot of it was because of the field. I was going to bust on Coach Foles if he was on the call, or maybe just some shoddy scorekeeping by yours truly. But a lot of 29 errors in the 3 games total. What do you guys remember? Any challenges defensively in terms of just hops or whatever else going on? Because again, a lot of singles, not a ton of home runs, but double-digit errors almost every game by both teams combined.
I don't know why, but I feel compelled to talk when errors are discussed.
I mean, it was a high school field first and foremost. So especially in upstate New York, where I think just about everyone here was from. So the fields they're in as good a shape as they can be, but they weren't perfect at the time, and I'm sure they still aren't. So yeah, no, errors were definitely a big part of it. I do remember that tournament. Going back to that Vermont game, I think. Because I started that game and I think we were up 4-0, and I want to say that rally that Vermont had to take the lead back from us was like hits and errors sprinkled in, and it was just kind of like the wheels were falling off. But that did kind of happen a lot in that tournament, in our games and the other games that were played too.
Yeah, that Albany game, a nice relief performance by a young freshman, Mike Aguilera. 5.1 middle innings there with. Shutting them down, and then Morgan came in and locked up Albany the last couple innings as well. So hanging on in the middle and late innings on the hill, and then gave the offense time to come back and get it done. So you guys were 2-0 for the first time heading into the final game, and obviously with the luxury of two games to win one. And that next day, of course, is the rain and lightning show. So that first game between Albany and Vermont, that elimination game went late. So our start was delayed almost 2 hours, if you guys remember. And then again, just 6 minutes into the game, I'm reminded by the press release, Lightning stopped it, and that delay lasted another 2 hours. Finally resumed at 11:44 p.m. What do you guys remember, anybody, about the delays and how crazy? What did you? I don't even remember. What did you guys do during that whole time? Leave the field, go in UE, and sit there? Anything interesting that you guys did to kill the time?
I don't know if you want to know that.
Who's going to take this one?
We did a telephone game. We all sat in like the locker room and passed. Like we're in elementary school. You pass one thing to the person to your left, it goes in a circle. I don't know if we want to leave it at that, but we try to keep ourselves occupied as best as possible and left it to the upperclassmen to start what they wanted said.
I think the two people that could touch on that the most aren't involved in the chat anymore, Coach Norris and Adami. I don't think either one of them are still here.
I do remember how mad Albany was that we weren't playing the game the next day, because of everything that was going on. Because of rest, they would have on their team.
What you guys might not know is Coach Norris actually played a big part in that. During the many delays, he actually came to me and asked what I wanted to do. And I told him we were finishing that night because I didn't want Albany to get any rest, give them any life. I wanted them to wear their pitching out. So he was instrumental in making sure that we played that game, no matter what President DeFleur said, and no matter what our conference commissioner said. So he gets a big time credit for that.
Coach, would you had that same ability to kind of sort of make that happen with Jim if the tournament was, let's say, back in Farmingdale as opposed to being in Binghamton?
I mean, Coach Norris was the guy that kind of oversaw that whole operation. So he was making those decisions and he was making the final call. But because we were home, he was able to basically ask me what I wanted to do.
But it's interesting, Tim. I'm just remembering now that of course you were on the short end of that kind of a decision in 2017, when as the top seed at Lowell, you were kind of forced to start a game that as I recall was pouring rain and you didn't really have much of a shot of finishing, and you really kind of got the shaft in that whole tournament because of that decision.
Well, that's true, and that's what happens when you have administrators who've never played the game of baseball before making decisions. And so, again, Coach Norris gets a ton of credit. He didn't try to make a decision on his own. He came to me and our coaching staff, and he listened to whatever we had to say. So, that's why we kept on playing that night.
What do you guys recall about the moment the sprinklers went off?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, God.
I want to pipe up about this. I started this game, and when the season started, I had gotten drafted the year before, came back, didn't get the game one start, didn't get the game two start. So as a senior, at the time, I remember I was pretty upset about it because what if we lost both games? That would have been the last start of my career would have been. I actually have the ball. I don't know if you guys remember this little artifact, the ball of shame. Never remember that? I still have it. So I want to read you guys that talking about, I was looking at the schedule while we were on the call, and we were 13-7 in conference. We lost 5 conference games in May. So we really kind of skidded at the end of the season. We got lucky a couple times against, Kyle mentioned it, we came back quite a bit, but at the end of the day, we were 13. We could have been 13-2 or even better, but we lost 5 of our last 7. And I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I know personally it was, there's always ups and downs in a season. And, when you're a pitcher and you have to sit there and watch everyone else struggle and you can't do anything about it but try and be supportive, it's pretty tough. You guys know I'm a pretty fiery guy, and I had high expectations for this season. It just didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And so kind of, I had all that bottled up into me. And when it was my turn, especially against Albany, I pitched probably one of the best games I've ever pitched against them the year before. I think we lost 1-0 or 2-1 or something. And I was really, for my own personal self-interest, but also it wasn't just for the rest of the team and to make myself feel better, but it was for the guys before, because I truly believe that we were the best team in 2007 without a question. That was probably the best team I've ever played on. 2008, that was our year as well, if you ask me. We just ran into a buzzsaw that there's a guy who pitched in the major leagues who beat us. I mean, what are you supposed to do there? So you guys know how I was before the games. I was kind of a mental head case. And to ask me to get up, warm up, sit down, warm up again, sprinklers come on, all that stuff during the regular season would have frazzled me and it would have been really bad. But I don't know how I got through all that. My arm was hanging, at that point. Everyone's kind of is at that point in the season. To warm up in that kind of an atmosphere with the rain and the humidity, and then to sit down. I mean, the game started at 9:30 at night, and then to get back up after sitting down, trying to stay calm, but also trying to save energy. It wasn't easy, but I made it happen. And if you look at the box score, I think I was going through and looking at, the games that we lost in the previous conference tournaments. They were all really low scoring. They were competitive and they were quick. If the bats didn't show up, it didn't matter how good or bad we pitched. We were going to win every single game. I think we scored like 15 runs in every game almost. So, I did what I could, but really the credit goes to the hitters because they bailed us out quite a bit. Not that, we needed to get bailed out all the time, but I think that it truly was a team effort. And yeah, there were errors and it was raining and it was late. But, for me personally, I just think that it was the culmination of, we the baseball gods owed us that conference tournament. And come hell or high water, it actually happened. I mean, what time do we celebrate at? What time did the game actually end at? Like 2:30 in the morning?
3:06.
We went to Denny's, then went back and partied.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they were upset that all the bars were closed and all the gas stations were closed.
Yeah, how eerie was that? You guys finished your dog pile, did the trophy ceremony and the couple interviews and things, and it truly was foggy and quiet. And it was, I'm sure, just the parents and people were there. It was really, as I recall, just almost eerie. It was just in the middle of the night. It was 3 a.m. It was must have been weird to kind of leave that field and then sort of you're wide awake, you're fired up, and then what? Yeah. So what did you guys do?
I'll go again. I couldn't have felt more relieved in my entire life. I don't know about Greg, Tom and Kyle, but I just felt so relieved. It was more, thank God we finally did it. We were so close so many times, and just to get over it, that meant more than anything, to be honest with you.
Hey, John, while these guys were looking for a place to eat or drink, I was actually so proud of what that team accomplished, not only during the season, but that weekend and like Jeff said, battling through what was a very long day and night. I actually headed right to my office and I sent out an email to our entire alumni base at whatever time it was, 5 o'clock in the morning, telling them exactly what time it was and what this group had accomplished. And I tried to give them as much detail as I could about the game, sprinklers, and you wouldn't believe the response I got. And not just because of what they did, but, it was the first time the program was ever going to the NCAA tournament. And I thought about it years later, and I thought that was probably the best decision I ever made, was to capture that moment right then and there for our alumni group, and give the guys that they're talking right now on this call all the credit that they actually deserved for what they had accomplished.
Then about less than a day or a little more than a day later, the NCAA selection show. What do you guys recall about seeing us pop up at that East Carolina regional? Were there any other moments where you sort of hoped that maybe we'd show up going down to Florida or somewhere else? Or were there you guys remember any moments during that selection show that stick out?
Yeah, I remember, watching it before the actual selections come out. You wonder where you might go, and us being a smaller program from the Northeast. I mean, you look at the Texases, the Floridas, and the Ole Miss. Those, the college baseball world, and it always is intriguing to be able to go into their stadium and play. But so you get the excitement's there. But then I remember when it popped up, seeing East Carolina and then George Mason, and then I remember looking and being like, holy shit, we can win some games. We can go in there and win some games. And I mean, story, we know what happened. But I remember, one, just being super thrilled, just that moment. You watch it. Me growing up, it was college basketball, right? And then getting older, and then I remember watching the selection show every year prior and seeing Albany get to celebrate, and then Stony Brook get to celebrate, and finally it was our turn. So I just remember more than anything just being excited, but then actually the selection happening, being like, well, damn, we can win some games.
Tim and Ryan, what were your thoughts when you saw those pairings?
Well, I remember what Ryan said to me. He looked at me and said, "What do you think New Mexico's thinking right now?"
Ryan, what were you going to say?
No, I actually, before the skipper had hired me to come to Binghamton, I had been at Mount Olive, which is only about probably 40 minutes away. And I knew the atmosphere down in East Carolina was pretty special. So I knew our guys, even though they maybe weren't quite the household name like some of the schools that Greg had mentioned was, I knew that, A, we could go down there and make a little bit of noise and maybe win a game or two. But B, I really felt like it was going to be a really great atmosphere because I knew about the jungle. I knew the amount of fans and just how feverish they were about ECU baseball. And I don't think our guys really had a great feel for that until we played that first game. It wound up, we didn't get to play at night, obviously, because of down there. We had a nice crowd for an 11 a.m. matinee, you know what I mean, or 10 a.m., whatever it was. If we would have played that night before, there would have been standing room only. So it turned out to be a pretty cool atmosphere when you come right down to it,
Yeah, the best part about it was all the heckling, the things that they would come up with. That was, really probably one of the better experiences with heckling that we got, I would say.
I mean, it was good for you, James, but we didn't get through our batting practice on the practice day. I thought we were going to have Joey Sharon subdued. Those guys were asking him if he needed a stack of books in left field and telling him to peek his head up. He couldn't see him over the – so I was like, oh, poor Joey.
Well, during the game,
they actually at one point said the moths in the outfield were going to pick me up and carry me away.
Joey got his revenge, though. He went yard twice in the game.
And I'm in right field. I think it was our third game. The fans were going, Bregartner, your first baseman looks like a fire hydrant. I just looked down. I was like, I got nothing. I got nothing to back my guy up here because Dave is short and stocky.
It's a chirp, It's one of the best chirps I've ever heard to this day. So I'm just gonna hit the cap.
It was a hat tip.
For some reason, they got Adami too. They singled out Adami, that poor guy. He's not on the call here, but they got on him pretty good.
It wasn't hard to get him.
No, they had the roster information on him.
So more rain again that night when we were supposed to get underway. Murphy, this was your start. So do you remember that scenario being delayed and then finally it called off? Probably a blessing, maybe, instead of having to go out and have it be halted in the middle of the game.
Yeah, I do remember for sure plenty of nerves. Coach Hurba touched on the fans, and it was a pretty electric atmosphere. And I didn't know much about ECU, when we drew that region as a bracket. I didn't know much about them myself, so it was shaping up to be a pretty cool experience. I mean, I would have been happy to pitch, that evening, the next day, whatever. Ironically, I actually had not a back spasm or anything like that, but 3 or 4 days prior, I'd done through a bullpen, and I was doing some band work, and the band snapped off the thing in our training room that was holding the bands, and it whipped me in the back, and so I had this a tiny little knot, I guess. I wouldn't call it back spasms or anything like that. So it was kind of good to get the extra day recovery for that reason. But yeah, I was pretty amped up to go that evening. I thought that would have been a really cool experience. And they showed up the next morning. I'm not sure it was as many fans, but it felt like, just electric of an atmosphere. So it was a pretty cool place to pitch for sure. I know I didn't perform all that well, but I definitely enjoyed it regardless.
Or if we're going to be on ESPN like that, on the bottom line, you need to notify Vegas of any kind of injuries. It's the law. So you can get in big trouble for stuff like that.
I think that's on the training staff to put that out there, right? I don't think that's on the player.
Yeah, but you hid it from them. I know you did.
So what do you guys remember, coaches, about? Must have been a real short overnight. I can't remember what time we left the stadium, but there wasn't a lot of sleep to be had probably that night. Getting back to the field. What time the next morning? By 8 or 9? 8?
John, I forget, but was anybody who was on this call? Did they have to do the drug testing that night?
Abrams did.
No,
Yeah, that was
Bales.
me.
You did.
Wasn't that after the game?
Yeah,
Wasn't it you?
it was before. It was
JD, it was you. You and Abrams, wasn't it?
No, that was after we actually played.
Okay.
That was after the George Mason game. I remember Abrams can fill in his side of the story. I was okay, but someone else had a little bit of trouble.
I don't know what happened. Was it after? I don't know. But I had prepared, like I drank a ton of water because I peed, but it was too diluted for me to pee.
Yeah.
Brutal.
That's what it was, yeah.
And Henry and I just had chronic hamstring issues all the time, so I was all hydrated for. I think the game was delayed or something, wasn't it? I don't know.
No, you delayed the whole bus from going back to the hotel because you couldn't go.
Yeah. Now it's crazy as I pee every 20 minutes.
Actually, now I'm remembering, Tim. I think there were a bunch of us that went to eat somewhere, and then some stayed back for the guys to finish up the drug test. Does that sound right? Tom, were you one of those guys that first night?
Oh yeah, that was a great evening. I think we were gonna go to IHOP that night too. I finally got my wish and ended up missing out on our IHOP because we were going to all those corrals time after time, and I wanted a little IHOP. And got some sweet chewy granola bars and a lot of Gatorade that evening. So yeah, thanks, Jeff.
My bad.
So you're back.
And IHOP gift certificates coming your way.
I think
you guys are back the next morning.
The other teams were in and out of there, and we were still hanging around. And they're like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "We're still got a guy." And they're like, "Geez, is this your first time?" And we were like, "Yeah."
Tim, what were you going to say?
No, I just remember getting back and guys getting back late, and then if it's a 10 o'clock start, geez, we're probably at the ballpark, 8:30. So it was a quick night, and we knew that we had a doubleheader that day, no matter what. And but these guys were ready to play. I mean, that's who they were, and their energy level didn't suffer. They were ready to go, and we gave a great effort on that entire day, from first pitch to the very last pitch of game 2.
What do you guys recall about seeing that East Carolina team up close? I mean, I didn't recall this, but I think they hit a home run on the very first pitch in bottom 1.
Yes, they did.
Sorry. And so they got off to an early lead, but you end up out hitting them 13-10. You came back. Obviously, Joey had a great game. Giulietti had 4.2 innings, 1 hit ball in the middle there. Joe, Sharon, first, I guess for you, you must have obviously felt pretty comfortable. What did it feel like to, down 7-0 to get us on the board with that 2-run home run you hit?
It was just overall the entire experience there was a great experience. That game is a game I will never forget for the rest of my life. I mean, we're talking about the whole 2009 season, and a lot of the memories are very vague, but I remember that game, every single inning of that game. So just to get us back on the board and having the game I had, it almost felt like one of those games where, like Kyle was saying, we were going to come back from that deficit that we were in and put up runs to take the game 1 against East Carolina that night or that morning.
Yeah, did it feel to everybody like you really did just sort of maybe run out of innings? I mean, you were coming back. It was 11-7 certainly is it's a game at that point, and you got some runs. I think 6 runs you got off Heston, their starter, who was unbeaten during the year. So I mean, you showed you belonged. Did that feel like enough in the dugout, knowing what you were headed for, an hour later, or was it still kind of frustrating to lose?
Honestly, going through the game, it was like, we were down initially by so much, but knowing that, with our team and our offense, if you could, like, for me to hold the team down, would be great for our team and our offense. And I do remember that there was a couple of innings that we did leave, runners on base. And it was like, if we didn't leave those runners on base, we would have won that game. It's like how close we actually were to beating them and upsetting them in that first game after being down so much was like, okay, we have a shot in this. And, that I think that led into the next game.
And how frequently did you guys play 2 9-inning games in the back-to-back like that? I mean, when does that happen? It certainly didn't happen at Binghamton often, but does anybody remember doing that before? Was there any issue of just being exhausted?
I think it was a different atmosphere personally. I mean, it's not hard for a team like us to get up for 2 games like that because we don't get this chance very often. But I'm a pitcher, so I'd like to hear more from the hitters that those guys are out there. These are long games too. That's the other thing. It's hotter down there. I remember it was very humid. They're standing out, getting this, balls hit at them and standing out in the sun. So I'd be interested to hear more from the position players to see what they thought.
Corey, what do you recall about that day? Corey, what do you recall about playing all those innings that day?
I mean, it was obviously tough, but like JD touched on, I mean, we're 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys. And it's an experience. You don't know how many times you're going to get that. I mean, for us, it was once in a lifetime, so but I think the atmosphere kind of gave us a bunch of energy. I think we fed off the atmosphere, the field we were playing at, the fans, and just knowing what a privilege it was to have that opportunity. I think we were able to grind it out just based on knowing what experience we had and the opportunity we had.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I really think it's one of the few times, I should say we probably one of the few conferences in the country that really prepares for that unknowingly, because we were playing a 7 and a 9 every Saturday and Sunday, so it's only 2 more innings. It's been a lot harder for a team out of the ACC or SEC that's used to strapping it on for 1 3-hour game 3 nights in a row. If you told them they had to play 2 9s, I think there might be some guys in their dugouts that's like, wow, this is a long day. I mean, there's only 2 more innings for us when you come right down to it than what we were already used to.
Yeah, true. I want to talk about George Mason for a minute because, again, on the surface, I guess, at least from my perspective, it would look like a winnable game. It would look like a game you guys might have played and won in March or something, before conference play started. But they seem to be sneaky good, as I'm kind of reminding myself. 42-12 on the season, second best win percentage in the country. They ended up with an at-large bid. They had 3 All-Americans. They had 5 draft picks that season. So what do you guys recall? Obviously, in less than an hour, at least the turnaround, you didn't have time to talk much about them. But even going down there to the regional, what do you recall knowing what they brought to the table, George Mason?
I think after the fact, knowing who the first baseman, I think his name Bohr, I think, ended up going there. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew they had this big horse at first base. But that stood out to me. Some of how big that guy was. He was very good at the time, and the record speaks for itself.
Yeah, I started the game, and I think that the one thing I noticed, and I played guys from the South through summer ball, but that team specifically, they had, I thought, probably the best eye of any college team I'd faced up to that point. I didn't throw a great game, but I also didn't pitch very bad, and I was nibbling the whole day. And I think you guys can all agree, I get squeezed every single game I've ever started. I mean, I've never seen a good umpire, so I don't know if there was any of that going on, but those guys were, I thought, they knew each hitter knew where the strike zone was, and they didn't swing at bad pitches.
Yeah, you guys got 2 in the bottom of the first, and on Corey had a 2-run homer. I wonder, you remember thinking how important that might have been, given that you'd fallen behind East Carolina quickly, just to get on the board and get the lead early on?
I mean, it's always nice to jump on the board early like that. I think we had a lot of confidence going into the game, knowing we had JD on the mound. Typically from what I remember, usually after a loss, we usually come back strong. It was nice to get on the board, but I think we all knew that 2 runs might not be enough. Obviously, Jeff's a phenomenal pitcher, but we wanted to get as many for him as we could, as quick as we could. it was nice to get on the board early. Yeah.
Henry, this is your game. What do you recall? You guys were up 4-2, and you hit the 3-run homer in the bottom of the sixth. What do you recall about that?
What do I recall? Good question. Not much other than the fact to piggyback off of what Corey was saying, that we knew 2 runs wasn't going to be enough. I think just a matter of a desire from the team just to push forward and to try to get to that other game. I think, like, I had to read back. I think it was an 0-1 pitch. And I remember getting a good pitch middle of the way. And those weren't the furthest fences, I remember, so I got a hold of one. And I'm just running, and, like, I'm just praying. I'm, like, blowing. I'm hopefully it goes out and clears the fence. And I just remember this just relief. I was ecstatic. And just knowing what it could do for the team in terms of pushing momentum and carrying this off into the next game. I think it was just a major hit.
I did feel bad for the pitchers in that. I felt like, I don't know about you, Henry, and the rest of the offense, I felt like the ball jumped in that state.
It definitely did. I don't know if it was the air or what. It was just every ball that was hit just seemed like it was just carrying.
Especially rollers that we saw.
Coach Hurba, we played at that field for our home field. How many home runs were you hit that year? Because that place was a joke.
I felt bad for the pitchers there. I mean, that was tough. I mean, I wouldn't want to leave a ball hanging there.
I mean, just if, Skip can attest to this. Listen, we have become accustomed to the conditions you play in. So if you think you're going to live in the air in the Northeast in March and April, you're going to have a lot of long fly balls that get caught. And so a couple of years ago, we went down to Mercer, our second week of the year, I think, had a little spring break week. And we hit some balls out down there, and it was the same feeling, Pete, where, we were looking at each other. I think you can always tell how the park's playing by how far the ball goes out. And some of those balls we were hitting out in that regional and other teams they were going over scoreboards. They weren't fence scrapers. They were balls that were nuclear. So that's usually an indicator when balls are leaving the yard by 100 feet, park's playing small,
Yeah, CJ, I was wondering, you caught that first game of the day, and then I think you and Skelly split the second one. But what was any of your messaging to the pitchers throughout these 3 games of the NCAA? Is just the way the ball was jumping. I mean, did you have to, what were you saying?
Not too much. I mean, they put a nice home run out, like you said first pitch, which I don't know who swings at the first pitch and then hits it out, by the way. But that was electric. But no, I mean, these guys battled all year. So, I mean, it was pretty simple. Walk out there, what's the plan today? How are we going to get through this, right? And they did their job. It was pretty simple. These guys know what they're doing, so.
And then you guys, so you really kind of trade back and forth with George Mason. I mean, every time they scored, you answered in those last couple innings. So, I mean, you kept them at bay and you win 11-6 and you're still alive and they're going home. Did anybody sort of, I suppose I already know my answer, but I mean, to win a game, obviously the first time we had been there, so you didn't have a chance before, but I mean, it wasn't common for America's teams to win. This was well before Stony Brook 2012 run. So, I mean, America's teams were the 0-2 teams. So, I mean, did you get any time after, later on that evening to sort of realize, wow, this was really a historic win here, not only for Binghamton, but for America East as well? Or were you just kind of locked into getting ready for the next game?
No, I'll chime in on that. I'll say, going back to what I said before about how excited you were during the selection show, and just you watched other schools in our conference do it before, and it was finally our turn, and you're happy to be a part of it, to be there to play, to be on that stage, and kind of feel like you earned your keep a little bit, amongst the rest of the nation. But that's kind of what it was at first, the build up to it. Then the games start. We lost a tough one. We bounced back, and I think it's as soon as we beat George Mason, feeling that we probably had a good chance going in to maybe win a game. And then actually doing it, it went from, at least for me, I want to speak for everyone, it was, okay, it's great to be here. It's cool to be here. The opening dinner, the crowd, the fans, the excitement, playing in a ballpark, like the one they had. It's all of a sudden this sense of belonging. We belong here. There not too many Northeast schools, especially from our conference, can go into a tournament and win a game and push the number 1 seed, the host team. So for me at least, and I'll have other guys speak to this as well, is immediately for me it was like, okay, yeah, we belong here. Like we can hang with these guys. We had a 6'6" guy and Joey. We kind of looked flunky. We lost the game early in the year by 30 runs, but hey, at that point in time, we belong there. So
agreed.
Anybody else? Any thoughts on just what it meant to win that game?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Greg. I think that we didn't really know at the time. I think maybe on the flight home, we thought that it was a bigger deal than maybe we thought when we were walking off the field. But this team, everyone wasn't on the 2007 and 2008 teams, but for some reason, and I don't know if we can put our finger on it, but we just never gave up. And that's not saying that the other teams did, but I can vividly remember in the America East Championships the years before, somebody scored a run early and then the bench was quiet. It was like you're walking on ice cubes. Well, this team, and I don't know if it was the personalities or what, but Kyle said it earlier, we were never really worried, and we knew what we had to do, and guys made mistakes, other people picked them up, and I don't know, it was kind of like the easiest team that I've ever played on. There's just no worry, and we were all, I wouldn't say we were lackadaisical by any sense of the word. Everyone was focused and everyone wanted the same thing. It just, I can't put my finger on what was different about this team than before. Maybe I can ask some of the younger guys.
It was the freshman.
What's that?
Yeah, it was the freshman.
That's what I'm saying. So, there wasn't as John said at the beginning, wasn't a big senior class. But, even the junior class had experienced winning at a high level previously. So when you guys got onto campus, and even for the sophomores, did you guys feel welcomed, or what was the atmosphere like? Like, how did you guys, I want to say fit in, because everyone on all the teams fit in, but you guys were able to feel comfortable enough to, start producing immediately. And I don't know what was different this year than the other years.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak for Dave. Obviously, is the two. I think there's only freshmen on the call, but I know first practice and meeting everybody, you've seen how big, Denny being 6'6", Bailey's, I think he had a beard at the times. Oh my God, these people are big, scary looking. And then once, big bunch of tough competitors, but very nice people. And I think there was no hazing. I think we probably got some, we had to do some things to, make the seniors laugh. But for the most part, everyone was a welcome group. I know from, Denny, Bailey's, Greg, Kyle, I don't know who else I'm missing. It was pretty easy for the freshmen to come in and feel welcome, and that led us to, produce on the field. But I'm not going to speak for Dave there.
Yeah, for sure. Just to add to that, I mean, coming into it, we kind of knew the foundation was already formed. We had good arms. The lineup was loaded. So I think, me and Augie used to talk about it. At the end of the day, you obviously want to do well as a freshman to prove yourself to the older guys, to the coaches, but we just knew that we didn't have to press too much because we had so many guys top to bottom who can make things happen, which I think ultimately took the load off our shoulders. And we kind of just simplified things and, made it a goal to contribute the best we could whenever we were called upon. And then I think just maintaining that mentality led to us getting more opportunities. And then we just continued to capitalize on it. And then, to put a bow on it, with the fact that everyone on the team were such good dudes, it just made everything mesh even more.
I want to ask Coach Sinicki and Coach Hurba, did you guys, we've talked about this, when I say we, like Kyle, Murph, Joe, Greg, the room assignments when we were on the road, this year specifically, I remember you guys split up the seniors almost exclusively and assigned us with freshmen. I'm wondering if that had something to do with the team meshing as well as it did.
Jeff, I'm not really sure. Each and every year is kind of different. Every club's got its own personality. You take the fall to assess who gets along and how you think guys would, be with each other. So I don't think there's any one right or wrong way to do it. So I can't think back that far as to why we did it that way. But Coach will back me up on this one. We talk about it. It's not like we just put names in a hat and pick them out. We talk about, how can we break this down? Who do we think is going to get along? And, who will respect, the way one person is compared to the way another person is. So it's definitely something we talk about, and maybe that had some, small factor into those types of situations.
Didn't we change it after the New Mexico series that year?
Hope so.
I'm pretty sure we did. I think I started off with Abrams and Joe, and then I don't remember who I was with. Morgan?
No, that's right, Kyle, because Abrams came to me and complained about you, so I had to change things up.
He was probably so sad.
All right, that's good. So that takes us to the final game against East Carolina, the rematch. We're up 7-3. Chokey had the big game, 5 RBIs. Bree Gardner drove in 3 as well. So up 7-3, and then they just put that 8 spot on the board in the 5th inning. And we, Walker certainly had a solid effort. He got into the 4th inning, but obviously everyone kind of knew we were on fumes in the pitching staff. What does anybody remember about how that game unfolded?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I think I came in after Walker, and I got out of 1 inning, and then old Kyle Roller came up, and he hit a ball about 400 feet over the fence off me. But the good thing is no one remembered it, because later in the inning, he hit one about 470 feet off of James. So it actually worked out pretty good for me.
That was over the scoreboard.
Yeah, thank God the scoreboard was there, Pete.
I thought the biggest play of that game. I thought one of the best play of that game was Henry made a super catch. I think at that time we were still up 7-3. I remember being in the bullpen at that point and just getting like a perfect view of it. I'm not sure if he brought it back, but it was like he had run and leap up against the wall. And
that was game
we
one.
had a 4-run lead at that point, and the people right behind the bullpen, like fans at that point, who probably still weren't taking us all that Thursday, were like, these guys are going to beat us.
Was that game 1?
Yeah.
Against them? That was game 1, right?
I thought that was the third game, the game that knocked us out.
It sounds familiar. I can't.
I thought it was
I remember it was game 1.
Yeah.
Oh, look. Either way, that was a moment in one of those where I thought we were gonna have a shot, and I remember it was pretty deflating to the crowd too.
So yeah, as I look at this box score more carefully, James and Noggs and Greg, you guys were pressed back into duty. So each of you guys, pitched twice in the regional here. What do you recall about what velocity and what you had left in the tank at that point?
I'll speak from me, it was more of adrenaline. I think it was the day before I threw 4 2/3, and it was like, all hands on deck. It was like, we got to give it our all to try to, get out of innings, get outs. And me being, normally a ground ball pitcher, if I, could get a ground ball, it would help and keep the ball in the ballpark. But obviously we all know my ball's still not landing. So, I'm just been great, take one on the chin,
I'll speak to that. Yeah, it didn't, going back-to-back days didn't really affect me because, even though I was a closer, I didn't have to pitch too much, right? My pitch count was never that high, or hopefully it was never that high, right? But, the way we did our series all season long, with the double headers, the 7 to 9, there was times where I'd pitch back-to-back games, but in the same day, and that would be kind of normal, the previous year and then that season. So it wasn't so much fatigue or anything like that, but I've never had to really do it, against the George Mason lineup and then come back and do it against an East Carolina lineup. So, it was a different animal, right? I just remember for me at that, going in, knowing that could very well be my last time on the mound. Nothing was guaranteed after that, right? And just wanting to just do anything I could. And, it wasn't my greatest performance. It wasn't awful. But I do remember giving up a home run and just being like, I remember being felt so defeated. Looking back on it, wasn't like I'm like, okay, it wasn't horrible to come back-to-back days, but I do remember being like, that was a game we definitely let get away. Like Northeast schools generally, the staff doesn't have the depth. You just don't have the arms. Once you get guy one all the way down, the depth just usually isn't there. The talent level is at from it's usually not there just yet. So I definitely was a little frustrated after that. Sad because the season was over, college career was over, but I definitely felt like we let that one get away.
Yeah. Does anyone? Well, I'll just rattle off what I meant to do in the beginning. I mean, just to put a proper perspective on this. So that season was a school record 30 wins, obviously regular season and tournament titles, third straight regular season title, first NCAA appearance, first NCAA win. He ended up being ranked 12th in the Northeast out of 69. It's when that Ping Association did those rankings. I think they fizzled away after a few years, but 12th in the Northeast. And then kind of the quirky thing that I always like to mention for a bunch of years, that the team increased its win total for the 6th straight year. And now I guess you could look at that and say, in order to do that, you got to start a little lower and work your way up. But nonetheless, no one in the NCAA had done that. It increased it 6 straight years. I think we bumped it up by 1 for a couple years in a row there. But just sort of an interesting little note to that season. But I guess kind of to wrap up here, you guys, what any thoughts come to your mind when you first think about when someone says something or you talk with somebody and that 2009 season comes up? Just any kind of final perspectives on what you remember most about these guys and this season you guys had. Going once.
This is an outfield thing, but I'll always remember like some of the best times we had in the outfield was when there was a pitching change. Sorry to the pitchers, but whether it was me, Henry, Corey, me, Corey, Henry, me, Corey, Henry, Joe, whoever the hell was out there, we would talk about the most random things ever in center field. And it was just absolute nonsense 24/7 whenever we met up.
I'll chime in. I'm very proud, like I said before, that we were finally able to get over the hump. I'm also proud that, as an upperclassman, I think, it's not just the upperclassmen. The coaches did a great job recruiting the younger guys, but I think to assimilate the team and get everyone bought in is important, and I'm proud of that. And I know, like Greg and Kyle and I, we always cheer for Binghamton to win, but when we win the conference tournament and then they lose 2 games, we're still the 1972 Dolphins. We crack a beer here and there, across the country. We're still the guys that have the only ones that have done it. So we hope it happens, but until then, we're the only ones that have done it. So I think we're all very proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely proud. I mean, that's one thing. Like guys that I'll meet here, living in Dallas now, and they have no idea about my history in college baseball, and we'll start chatting it up. And like, I can't wait to get to the point where we talk, well, yeah, well, conference champion, this and that. We start talking it up, but I'll echo what Denny said though, is that why it's so special too, is that like, we keep in touch, all us guys, we keep in touch. A lot of people are not like constantly throughout the year, literally almost on a daily basis. And, especially when the season rolls around and then, the conference tournament rolls around, we're all watching. We're all at work, but we're all texting each other. We got the live feed up now that, that they have available now. Like we're constantly paying attention. But yeah, we want to see these guys succeed. But like Jeff said, we only want to win a game in the tournament. So we'll never forget that. We're going to live that up as long as we can, because with the way the program's going, we know that's going to end soon. So we enjoy it while it lasts.
I'm also pretty proud. If you look at the recent success they've had, it has, a little to do with us. We lay the groundwork, and you can tell that, Joe and Abe's, after the seniors of 2009 graduated, they won the conference tournament, the regular season 4 years in a row. So those guys deserve a lot of credit. And then it just kept happening. We kept winning. Binghamton's a powerhouse. We've had maybe 2 down years in the last decade. Success is not an accident. And, it started with the guys that came before us. And, yeah, we were the first ones to do it, but I think a lot of the credit goes to the people that came before us. And I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm pretty proud that we were able to hang that banner, because the flags fly forever.
Tim and Ryan, what are your thoughts when you think back of this team and what they accomplished?
Well, it's just a special group, I mean, plain and simple. It's the first time, so it's always going to be the most memorable, I think, in my career, to look back at this group and know what they accomplished and know, like Jeff said, there were guys before them that won regular season championships and laid the groundwork, but this is the team that put us on the map, so to speak, and got us to the tournament, got us a win. It had a lot to do with their abilities, but it also had a lot to do with their character and the types of people they are. So it's a special group. They will always have a big place in my heart, and even a bigger place maybe in the history of Binghamton University baseball.
Ryan,
and for you pitcher, and real quick, John, for you pitchers, you guys will appreciate this. I am wearing my 2-out concentration fantasy football T-shirt while I'm on the call.
All right.
Yeah, John, I mean, I second what Skip said, for all the same reasons, but also, I mean, this senior class was the first group of kids I ever coached at Binghamton, so I came in with them. So I kind of grew up and learned, if you want to call it like the Binghamton way, with them, And so I'm really attached to this group. This is really the seniors on this team were the first season I was ever a part of was their freshman year. We were practicing at Conlin Field, off campus that year. I mean, I could go back through a million memories I have. So for that very first fall that Skip hired me, for it to culminate 4 years later with being one of the final 32 teams in the nation playing baseball, it's pretty overwhelming. We came a real long way, and I feel really personally attached to this group because, like I said, I grew up with them, and I feel like, I always go back to this, John. I said this to you when we did the 2016 team. My connection in large part is on the recruiting end with these guys. I remember where I was standing when they committed. I remember pacing in different rooms, and I remember Mike Aguilera tried to cancel the visit the night before. Remember that, Mikey? Like, he's like, coming up. I just don't think it's for me. You don't have my major.
Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with Binghamton at that moment. My mind was quickly changed. I don't know how it changed because I had to go to class with Pete when I visited.
I got you out of class, remember? I got class canceled, which makes all the sense in the world now.
Yes. But no, that's very true. My parents were pushing it. I remember I tried to get out of it, and yourself and my parents wouldn't let me.
Oh,
Best decision made.
Never forget this group. So good to see everybody's face tonight. Really is.
I appreciate it. Anybody else have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I wanted to touch bit on what Coach Hurba was mentioning. When we came in with him, I think just me and Denny on this call, and Greg sort of, but not really.
Semester
not halfway through. But like we told you guys this before, but that first fall I was here, I mean, we had just a bag full of old beat up bats that a freshman had to carry to every practice and game. We had one T-shirt to practice in. That was like the most terrible T-shirt ever. One gray T-shirt said Binghamton lowercase letters.
Wider than it was,
that was
longer.
It. Yeah, we were a part of like growing this to where now when the younger guys were coming in, we were expected to perform, expected to be successful, where I don't know if I felt that when I first started. So from when I first started in 4 years to what we left it off, that's what I'm like super proud of. And it was a lot of fun along the way.
We looked like Fruit Loops. I went to Liverpool High School. We were orange and blue. I was wearing my orange socks, white pants, and a gray shirt. I mean, it was a joke.
Well, I'm glad things changed for the better with the apparel. All right, you guys, thanks. I appreciate it. It was great to see everybody, and thanks for calling in. Stay safe and stay connected to each other. And again, take care. All right.
Thanks, John.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, boys.
See you, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
See y'all. Take care.
See you guys.